Gospel of the Lord according to the book of John. Jesus said, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats of this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. The Jews then disputed among themselves, saying, How can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus said to them, Very truly, I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you will have no life in you. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them. Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever eats me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate and they died. But the one who eats this bread will live forever. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
We read the psalm responsibly. Fear the Lord, you saints of the Lord, for those who fear the Lord lack nothing.
The lions are not bond and suffer hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack nothing that is good.
Come, children, and listen to me. I will teach you reverence for the Lord.
Who among you takes pleasure in life, and desires long life to live prosperity?
Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from lying words.
Turn from evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it.
The second reading this morning is from Ephesians chapter 5. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of the time, because the days are evil. So do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. As you sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs among yourselves, singing and making melody to the Lord in your hearts, giving thanks to God the Father at all times for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
That we approach each story with. The first one is we read the story in light of the bigger story of which it is a part. There's a big grand narrative in the Bible, and each of these little stories has a place that connects us to the greater story. Second, we read each story in light of its own purpose. It had a meaning 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, and that meaning hasn't changed. Third, we understand important cultural elements in this story. How does the culture, the day, the worldview affect the way that people express themselves? And lastly, we read the story recognizing God as the hero. With that in mind, I'd like to read our story from today, which comes from Daniel chapter 3. And it's a story of 3 faithful friends of the prophet Daniel. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messengers to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, magistrates, and all the provincial officials to come to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So all these officials came and stood before the king Nebuchadnezzar, the statues King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald shouted, "People of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and other musical instruments, bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will be immediately thrown into a blazing furnace." So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race and nation or language, bowed to the ground and worshiped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. But some of the astrologers went to the king and informed on the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "Long live the king! You issued a decree requiring all the people to bow down and worship the gold statue when they hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and other musical instruments. That decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into a blazing furnace. There are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue as you have set it up." Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage. Ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I have made. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace, and then what God will be able to rescue you from my power?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into this blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to your majesty that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of the army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to throw them into the blazing furnace. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king, in his anger, had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. But suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men, unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed. And the 4th looks like a god." Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out of there." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, officials, governors, and advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, and their clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell of smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than to serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb, and their houses will be turned to be heaps of rubble. There is no other God who can rescue like this. Word of God, word of life. Thanks be to God. So here we have another of the great stories of the Bible. One of those stories that if you've watched VeggieTales, you've seen a reenactment of this. If you remember back to your Sunday school days, you're familiar with this story. There are three faithful friends who refuse to bow down, and as a result, they get thrown into some kind of fiery pit or furnace. But let's do some little background information. How did we get to this point? Israel, as a nation, was not doing a good job. They were not fulfilling their mission with God. They had walked and wandered away from God. They had stopped worshiping Him. They had done evil things in God's sight. So God said, the land I gave you as a precious gift needs a rest. You've harmed it so much that I'm going to kick you out of the land for a time, for a period of time, as long as you've forgotten to follow my commands. 1 year for every 70 years you did not do what you were supposed to. And, well, it's not going to be pleasant for you. But the land needs a break from you. You won't go willing, so I'm going to force you to do it. So what happens is, the nation of Babylon comes. God does not protect Israel, because Israel has abandoned God, and the people get taken away into slavery. There are three prophets that are speaking to Israel from God throughout this entire crisis. Daniel, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah. All three of their stories happen concurrently at the same time. In fact, all three of the prophets who know each other. They write letters back and forth. Daniel goes with the first wave of people and his three friends. They are the young nobility, the king and his son, the people who have wealth and privilege. They get taken first through this slavery. Eventually there's going to be a rebellion, and then the common people are going to be taken into slavery, and Ezekiel's going to go with them, and Jeremiah's going to be left holding the bag in Jerusalem as it's besieged for 2 years. So as Daniel and his friends go into slavery in Babylon, they are taken out. Daniel and his three young friends, they're very young, they're teenagers when they get taken off against their will. And for them, it's a little bit nicer than it is for other people, because they're chosen because of their status, their privilege, or whatever, to be young students who are going to be trained in different cultures and languages so that they can serve as administrators throughout the big empire of Babylon. So they get to not have to, they're not slave laborers, they're not like in prison, they're going to school, they have to, the idea was that as they brought people who had gifts and abilities, who were so able to be educated, Babylon, the nation, would train them and culturalize them, teach them their way of doing things, so that they would forget who they were, and they would become servants of the empire. As they are doing this, there are several lessons that happen. The previous chapter, in chapter 2, Daniel interprets a dream for the king about what's going to happen in the future. And the king is astonished, because Daniel is the only one that could do that. And so Daniel's already risen up in the ranks, and his friends rise up with him. So they've already experienced some benefits of being faithful to God. Excuse me. That brings us to chapter 3, where all of a sudden, after having heard his vision, his dream interpreted by Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar has a glimpse of what the future is going to bring, and this is how he responds. He builds a big statue. We don't know what the statue is. We don't know if it's a statue of King Nebuchadnezzar himself, or his vision of God, or his vision of the future. Somehow he responds to God speaking to him through Daniel by building a big statue and says, all right, everybody's going to have to bow down and worship this whenever I say so. And of course, the three young friends, Daniel's off doing something, we don't know where Daniel's at. But these three young friends, they refuse. They say, no, we're not going to do it. They're brought up by, in front of King Nebuchadnezzar. The Chaldeans are these astrologers, those who are ethnic, the majority ethnicity in Babylon, the people in power. They don't like the Jewish people. They don't like the fact that these other people are gaining some prominence. So they point out to the king, hey, look at those three guys over there, those Jewish guys. They're not doing what you say. They're being disrespectful to you. And so King Nebuchadnezzar is in a full rage, and he brings them before them, and he tells them, you got to do it. They don't do it, and so they throw him into the pit. But the fire doesn't hurt. So what do we learn from this story? What are some observations that we can make that can help shape our faith and our relationship with God today? Well, the first thing is this. This is not the first time that the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is challenged. You see, as young students, they're already graduated from whatever schooling they had to go through. They're already serving as administrators. But way back when they first came, they were challenged that they had to eat meat and other foods that were considered unkosher or unlawful for them to eat. And they stood up for their way of living, for what God had called them to do. They said, we can't do that. Just let us eat vegetables, and we will be just as healthy, just as smart, and just as able to do everything that everybody else can do. And that was kind of a smaller audience. It was just their fellow students and their overseer that was watching them. But they were already choosing to be faithful to what God had commanded to them. That was just one time. And I'm sure that there were other times that were preparing them for the big audience that they were going to have when they were going to be on the scene in front of the entire nation. And so this is what our observation is. It's important to be faithful in the small things. We've heard this story before, but here it's illustrated again. As we're faithful in the small things, it builds our ability to both trust God in the big things, but also to see and experience how God is moving in those big moments when crisis happens. Second thing that we can observe from this is that they've already got a truth about the future from Jeremiah and from Ezekiel and Daniel. All three of those prophets are going to give a message to Israel. And they're going to share it with letters between each other. They're going to reference the letters. And that's this. Although they're going into slavery, and God tells them to settle in, to put roots down, to build homes for yourself, because they're going to be there for a while, a day is coming when God's going to bring them all back. They know this. They've listened to what God is telling them instead of doing the woe is me. Because you can imagine how difficult life was for them. 3 young men, they're taken away from their families, they're forcibly moved to another land where they speak another language, and they've got to go to school, and they've got to be culturized, they've got to deal with all of the stress that comes with that. And they could have said all along, woe is me, look at this, my life is horrible, I'm a slave, I'm a glorified slave, but I'm a slave nonetheless. And life, they could have said, this is just ridiculous. But instead, they're still listening to God. They're still listening to what God is speaking to them. And they know that eventually, God, it might be a long time, God's going to gather his people together. Excuse me. I went on vacation last week and I got sick. Go figure. And that's so important because the other thing that we observe from this is that the 3 young men are still trying to fulfill the mission that God has given us. When they go before Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar says to them, I'm going to throw you into the fire pit. I'm going to give you a second chance. If you don't bow down and worship that statue, I'm going to throw you into that furnace and you're going to die. And what is their response to Nebuchadnezzar? And this is so important. God is able to save us. But even if God doesn't, we want you to know we're not going to do that. They don't know what God's going to do in that moment. They don't know that they're not going to die a very horrible death. But it doesn't matter to them. Because they are doing something else. They are fulfilling or attempting to the mission that God has given us. They're still listening to God, still doing that mission. And you can ask, what is this mission that has captivated them, that has gotten their attention, that they continue to do? The mission that Israel had, that they had forsaken, and that's why they got kicked out of the land, is that they were supposed to show the whole world that they needed a Savior. I've said that before, but that bears repeating. And the main way that they were going to convince the world that they needed a Savior They were to live out Torah. They were to obey this law and live in a special way so that their lives would be a multimedia platform that the world would look at and see, oh, we're in trouble. We need a Savior. That was the idea. Now, Israel as a whole didn't do that, but there were always faithful people within the nation that did continue to do that. And so that's what we see Daniel and his three friends doing. They're living out Torah. They're not trying to say our way is better than your way. All they're saying is that this is a mission that God has given us. We have to do this because this is how we live out our special relationship with God. It doesn't matter what the circumstances of this world are. They were living with wealth and privilege. They were living a good life, and it was all taken away from them. They were dragged into slavery, forced to serve as administrators in an empire that was hateful to them, that made them try to force them to throw off their relationship with God. They refused. They still, in those moments when circumstances changed, when life turned out not the way that they thought, they still kept serving God. And they still were focused on their mission. And that's going to bring up our main takeaway. And that's this. We still have to serve God's mission. We still have to continue doing God's mission despite whatever circumstances or life changes happen. Many of you are experiencing life not quite the way that you anticipated it. Maybe you're stuck in a job and you hate it. Maybe you imagined having a wonderful marriage and it just hasn't happened. Maybe you expected your kids or grandkids to stay a little bit closer and they're not. Maybe you wanted to always do something that's just never happened. Life doesn't always turn out the way we wanted, the way we wanted to. It didn't for these three young men. And the amazing part of this story is that even though life throws them curveballs, even though life gets turned upside down, they are still listening to what God says, and they're still living out Torah, because that was their particular mission. That's so important for us to remember. Our lives are a little bit different. We don't live in a world like they lived, but there are some important similarities. For us, like I just said, sometimes our lives don't turn out the way that we expect them to. But what's more, we have a mission. It's not the same mission that those three young men have, but God has given a mission to God's church. And our mission is to help the world know that a Savior has already come, that forgiveness and grace is open to everyone. And just like with those three young men, despite where our lives might go, despite the turns that are unexpected that happen, we have to be faithful to that mission. There are a number of ways that we as a church tend to misinterpret this story. We get it wrong. In fact, bring up the next slide. The first one is here. There's three ways that I think that we really misinterpret this story. And the first one is this: if I just have faith, the flames will never hurt me. That is not true. That is not from this story. Things went wrong in the lives of these three young men. There were many things tragically that went wrong. And when they were going to be thrown into the pit, they had no clue would God save them or not. They weren't sure. They knew what they were supposed to do anyway. Sometimes we think, if I'm just faithful to those limbs, I'll be like those three friends, and they never will touch me. Actually, oftentimes the flames do touch us. That's the point of the story. We don't change the mission we have just because the circumstances of our lives change. Second one, people who are different from me then are the enemy. There were a lot of people that were different than these three young men. They were a small minority amidst a big multicultural majority of people from all languages, cultures, tribes, because the empire was vast. And it brought all of these people together and made them serve the administrative runnings of the empire. They were part of a big multicultural mixing pot, and they were a small majority. And what's easy for the church to do today is to look at the world around us and say, those people are just so different. They have different values, they have different ways of living, they have beliefs, they dress differently. And it's easy for us to think of them as the enemy, but they're not. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego don't treat the Chaldeans, the people who ratted them out, as the enemy. They don't treat King Nebuchadnezzar as the enemy. They realize that those people are the mission. Reaching those people are the goal. And too often the church builds walls and says, you're different than us and we're going to preserve our way of living. And we have to realize that those people who are different, even those people that are enemies to God, they are not our enemies. They are the mission. They are the people that God wants us to connect with and to reveal to them that they are forgiven, that they are loved, despite anything that they went through. And the last one, America does not equal Israel. Israel had a special covenant, a special mission with God. America, God does not have a special covenant with America. God does not have a special relationship with America. God has a special covenant with God's church. God has a special relationship with God's church. And the two are not the same. And too often we think of this story of three young men being faithful to their cultural tradition and not wanting to bow to the pressures of multiculturalism and to stay the way they are. In America, we're not supposed to stay the way we are. We're not supposed to stay to some image of the church in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, or 80s, depending on how old we are. We're supposed to change so that we can continue to fulfill God's mission. What those three young men were doing was unique to them because part of their mission was to live out Torah. We have a different mission. And America does not have the same kind of relationship with God that Israel did. And that's an important thing to remember. Because as a church, we need to be willing to do what we can to stay faithful to God's mission, not to the way of living that we used to live out 20, 30 years ago. What is your mission? How are you fulfilling that mission despite the ways that your life has changed? Our first takeaway, this is an important one, we skip it. God goes with us no matter what kind of pit we fall into. One of the big parts of this is that Nebuchadnezzar, the previous chapter with Daniel, had already been introduced to God. He already seen the power of the God of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But he didn't understand it, and he responded in a really wacky way. So once again, Nebuchadnezzar gets to see God. He sees God in that fiery pit. And as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are in that furnace, as they're not being consumed by the flames, Nebuchadnezzar changes. He praises God. And then we realize that God goes with these three young men as they go into that pit. God has been with them as they've been dragged off into slavery. God has been with them as their lives have been turned upside down. God has always been with them. But God doesn't save them because of their faith. God saves them because Nebuchadnezzar needed to see God. You see the difference? It's not because those three friends are faithful, and it's not because they have great faith that they are saved. It actually has nothing to do with them. Their job was to be faithful, and once they refused to bow down, their job was done. Nebuchadnezzar needed to see God. He misunderstood what Daniel told him in chapter 2. So he needed another lesson, another chance to see who God really is. So God takes the life of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and says, okay, I'm going to provide a lesson for Nebuchadnezzar and the whole of Babylon, a public lesson. And so this story isn't really about the three friends. It's not about how great of a faith they have. It's about how God uses our little stories, our personal stories, so that other people can encounter the greater, the bigger stories, so that other people can see God. You see the difference? Churches today often say, Christians say, oh, I want the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego so that I can escape the fiery pit. But their faith is not what led them to escape the pit. It was because God needed their lives for a lesson for Nebuchadnezzar. And so our takeaway is that no matter what happens, God is always going with us, even when our lives turn into a big furnace of flames, where everything is going on. And our last takeaway, our mission remains the same, even when our life circumstances change abruptly. We need to hold on to that truth. We need to remember it because we all encounter these incredible changes in life. Life doesn't always work out the way we want. And even when it doesn't, we have to remember the mission God has given us doesn't change. We're still called to let the world know that a Savior is waiting. That a Savior has come and that forgiveness and grace has already been offered to them. Amen. Let's stand for our song of the day.